So at this point, we offer our own reflections arising from the practice of lectio Divina, and this is spontaneous, not rehearsed. So the experience is for us just as it will be for you if you join us. Perhaps I should say, insofar as I know, why I selected this particular passage from the Gospel. And I think it is because in some way I don't fully understand. It seems to sum up or to express what contemplation is, what contemplative prayer is. I can perhaps reflect a little further. I remember in past years having to study the nature of knowledge, epistemology. I'm sure many of you are familiar with those sorts of questions. Question of how we know. And there are many books written on the subject. But for me, in some way, this passage is expressing the difference between empirical knowing and intuitive knowing, knowing from experience, and knowing in a more comprehensive way, not excluding experience, but taking it further.
Quite hard to put things into words, isn't it? To actually speak after the lecture.
Yeah.
One touches into that experience that you're talking about.
I had a sense as I observed the lectio. You're right, Joe. It's very difficult to talk because we are still in the lectio, really. But I had the sense of, as Viv, you've already introduced the difference between empirical learning and how you describe it as intuitive learning, a contemplative prayer, which is a transformative process where we are not searching for anything, not searching for knowledge, not even searching for wisdom. We're just presenting ourselves in stillness with the intention that we are open to God's transformation in us. So it is God that is transforming us into God. Not that we're not God, but we don't realize it because we have swallowed and contributed to the illusion of separation through our lives, which are subject to all kinds of programming, of course, pertinent to our time and place, to the influences on us through our parents, our teachers, our society, our popular culture, education, and so on. And it's no different for the writer of Philip and for the community. They are aware of these same pressures on life and influence, but they've come to know the transformation that is going on inside. And as I've said before, this gospel seems to me to be instruction on and observation on the process. Even talking about a process for me is not truth, because it implies the impetus coming from us. It's not. So the contrast is clear there between our search for knowledge, which goes on in our life, and we've all, at least the three of us sitting here, have experienced academic pursuit of knowledge, for example. And we know well how we pile up books and our minds are searching through the books, trying to edit and to draw in strands of thought from theologians, philosophers, whoever they are, from many places in history, and trying to draw that into a stream of palatable thought, which can be passed on to another mind or a series of other minds. And it's hectic. There's a massive energy involved and real control, and the mind is going and going and going, and it can happen for hour after hour, and it mimics in many ways our normal everyday consciousness, which is kind of like a whirl of activity, blurred if we look at it. But contemplative prayer is stillness within that. So the whirl begins to slow down, and we begin to see through the whirl. We begin to see reality, I suppose. Again, that's just a word, but we begin to receive then, I think, perhaps. And it's different, because when we are just moving in the world, even if we're trying to control the world so that we think something, we're not becoming that we're thinking. And I think this is what the passage is saying as well, that we're not just, we can't we can think something, we can observe something, we can watch something, but we don't become that. But in the stillness, as we are being transformed, we are becoming. So to a lot of religious people, it seems when you say I'm becoming Christ, or Christ is Christing me into Christ, for a lot of religious people who are just thinking, that seems like heresy. Which may be one of the reasons why this gospel was suppressed.
As you were speaking, Tim, I thought about leading a meditation on Monday, and the process that I went through, probably very similar to both of you when you're leading a meditation, of that whirlwind of mind, of kind of coming to grips with. It's a bit like the process of lectio, perhaps. So, starting off with looking and seeing and feeling and thinking. But anyway, I'm kind of like researching. What did salt? It was about salt, wasn't it? What did salt mean at that time? Why use that metaphor? But I remember in the meditation, in the process of that process of everything falling away, I happened on the realization came to me about that passage about cutting off. If one of your hands sins, cut it off. One of your feet sins. And that realization, to the extent that it was a realization, that was a realization in the moment, given when everything went still. So I can relate to what you're saying in that way.
Yes, I think there's something about when you so graphically described how we've all searched and searched and read and so on. And maybe at some ultimate level, we never needed to do that. But somehow the doing of it has led us. There have been pointers, or we've had suddenly, we might be halfway through a book and suddenly, oh, it's as if, and Jesus did say, didn't he, seek and you shall find. There's a sense that you have to do something about it. You have to try. You have to try and find, and we're, I think, aware that we're looking for what we call truth. We don't know what it is, but and there's something about the sincerity of trying to understand the world, which you might see as the sun that we can see, the sincerity of trying to say, why is that sun there? Why is the earth there? What is all of it? Does it have any meaning? That's what propels us to that other place where we don't have to bother about the meaning, but we have the great struggle of trying to get under all the chatter and all on the worldly existence and questions and so on. So it's not as if the whole business of seeking is unimportant, but it's somehow that when you get at least nearer a different understanding, you can see it as somehow a separate process, important, but not the same thing. I don't know, it's very hard to...
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. Were you going to speak?
Thank you, Tim. Yes, like suddenly one switched into a different gear.
Mm.
I was thinking of what I was told about learning to guide retreats, and I was told that Rudolf Steiner said that that preparation that one puts in to, for example, guiding a retreat is very important in the way that we're saying that that actually we prepare for a meditation or a retreat, and we think that this is what we're going to do. But as we both, three of us know, actually that's not what happens in the end. And it might bear some relation to it, but actually what happens is different. And Rudolf Steiner, just thinking about Steiner, I mean, it was extraordinary, the original stuff which came from him, but that's a slight aside. But just thinking about Steiner. Anyway, Tim, you were also wanting to say something.
Well, I was just going to respond to Viv about this pursuit for knowledge. We've been given both, haven't we? We have the mind that is capable of rational thought, and we have what we call the heart space, where we can meditate. And those two things can work together, as Joe, you imply when you say we research and try to construct something, but then something else happens, but they are interrelated. What has been lost really for the years, the hundreds of years since the so-called Age of Enlightenment is that kind of harmonic working together of those facets of our human being, where the thought side of it, the logic side of it, has been mistaken for God, really, and the spiritual, contemplative, receptive, touch with wisdom has been trampled. But it does seem that this time is a time of awakening for people from many of all probably traditions and religions and non-religions. People all over the world seem to be waking up. That kind of crust of complacency that was engendered by powerful societies and empire controlling seems to be breaking. Although the empires are trying to close it up now after coronavirus with the restriction of movement. And this morning I've read that the British government are considering ways to stop migrants coming into the waters around the coasts and sending them back. There's a terrible kind of controlling influence going on. But there is at the same time this awakening. It's a very interesting time, actually, with potential.
Yeah.
I think when I was struggling to come to terms, this is going right back, struggling to come to terms with understanding a deep inner experience that I received, and the picture of the world that I'd grown up with, which was all based on, as you said earlier, Tim, I think the Enlightenment and the worship of reason and the rational. And gradually I came, I think, to understand that, you know, people I might have shared this with would say, well, it's just imagination, it's just irrational, it's you can't base your life on that. But in some way I knew that it had touched my life in a way that nothing ever had before, and that it was real. But I couldn't escape from the mind, the fear, the doubt that it's not rational. And after a while I came to see that it's actually supra-rational. It contains the rational but goes beyond it. And somehow that made me understand that we don't, as I think were saying earlier, we don't undervalue everyday experience and all the expertise of science and the arts and all of that, that is at the level of the mind, although the arts are beyond the level of the mind, of course. But we don't have to discount all that, because it's part of who we are and of whatever reality is. But we do have to understand that there is something that goes beyond it. And so much of our sort of zeitgeist doesn't go beyond it.
Yeah, like the whole apprehension of different realities and different dimensions, and using different senses. Just now I had to mute myself because the dogs were barking at the delivery. I was very much put in mind of other senses. Yes, what you said then, not losing, reminds me actually of the last of a paragraph over the page, and I wondered if we could just include that, if we can make reference to that, because it seems to kind of it says, in this temple space you become all things, and you see yourself no more, and in that all other you become all things and never cease to be yourself. When I read the passage and was working with the passage in preparation for today, and I had included that little bit, for me I've had quite an emotional response, really, quite a heart-based response of a sort of uplift of joy somehow, that to be at my most complete, to be, to have the realization, to know the breath, you are the breath, to know the Christ, you are the Christ, etc. That I'm still myself. I can still be myself. There's something for me utterly joyous in that kind of completeness, that feeling of who said a poem springing to mind about something about and when you reach the end, what is it?
The end is the beginning.
The end is the beginning.
You realise that you've been there all the time. It's Eliot, isn't it?
Eliot, yes, yes.
Yeah, in the four quartets. But
yes, yeah. I think it's the journey of the Magi. Is it when they arrive home at last, or maybe it's not only.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a little like the Gospel of Thomas. Tell us, Lord, how it'll all end. Well, have you found the beginning yet that you're asking?
But this is an interesting example of what we were saying earlier, because when I initially chose the lectio of this time, I chose more. And I think quite rightly, you both said it was too much and just take the one verse. But of course, I saw the one verse as ending because it's all on that page.
Yes.
And it didn't take in today, but it had gone over. That there's more of it on the next page. But your pointing that out, Joe, has brought a further insight that we weren't expecting. Or maybe you were, because you knew it was there, but I didn't. So how I think you're right that in that final few lines, there's some sort of resolution of what is on the first page that we read. Thank you, Joe and Tim. It's always helpful to share reflections on these very deep passages, and it's always illuminating. And we had a realization during the discussion that actually there was on the next page a few more lines of the verse. And when we read them, I think each of us experienced in our own way some sort of deepening of what we've already got from the passage. And so we'd like to share this last part of verse 44 with you now. In this temple space, you become all things, and you see yourself no more. And in that all other, you become all things, and never cease to be yourself.
In this temple space, you become all things, and you see yourself no more. And in that all other, you become all things and never cease to be yourself.
In this temple space, you become all things, and you see yourself no more. And in that all other, you become all things, and never cease to be yourself.
Amen.